like to exemplify to you how this talking about them works. So I'm going to do the conventional thing now and walk you through this way, this dominant way in which we talk about them. I'm going to be drawing on the statistics which come out of the child gauge, which I'm sure all of you use regularly. I'm deeply associated with the child gauge myself and serve as an advisor to the organisation that puts the child gauge together. But I'd like to share with you how, just using that way of talking, that I'm deeply implicated. So I'm not absolving myself from this if you like, discourse, this way in which we come at these kinds of issues. But what the implications of this are, I think, are really important for us to engage with. So the child gauge will help you say very clearly and very nicely things like nearly 2/3 of our children live below the poverty datum line, 61%. The majority of them are in households where their families are earning under 552 rands per month. 36% of our children live in households where no adults are employed. It's worse in the country when you come to provinces like Limpopo and the Eastern Cape, where 78, almost 80% of our children are in those kinds of circumstances. Social assistance grants are an important source of income for these kinds of children. By April 2011, there were 10.5 million children in the country receiving, and the recipients of these kinds of grants. Further 113,000 are receiving the care dependency grant. When we talk about their health, indicators are suggesting that under 5 mortality in the country is decreasing, which is a good thing. Infant mortality rates are also decreasing. They currently stand at 34 deaths per 1,000 live births for 2010. In 2007, 81% of these child deaths in the country came from the group of children under the age of 5 years. In the same year, 438,000 children under 15 years were estimated to be HIV positive. I hope you're following me as I'm doing this descriptive thing, which I'm suggesting to you is our bread and butter. Nearly 30% of children live far from their healthcare facility, and 16% of them lived in households that reported child hunger. The child gauge goes on to say that many children have to travel long distances to school. 1 in 6 children, 16% of them, live far from their primary school, and this increases to 1 in 6 in high school. While South Africa has made significant strides in improving access to education with a gross attendance rate of 97% in 2009, access has unfortunately not necessarily translated into improved educational outcomes. I'd like to draw on other work that is not reported in the child gauge, but which I also am associated with. I have for the last 10 years or so been heavily involved in these grade 3 and grade 6 and grade 9 tests that we do in the province. We administer these tests at the Schools Development Unit at UCT. All of you now know that we're also just about to go into these national assessments, the annual national assessments, and so on. What these assessments are showing is that we have an incredible, what you might call, poverty of performance amongst our children in these tests. At the grade 3 level, only 31% of learners had a score of over 50% in literacy, and only 17% a score of over 50% in numeracy. And unsurprisingly, there's a knock-on effect to grade 6. In grade 6, only 15% of our children have scores of over 50% for language, and only 12% of them similar scores of over 50% in mathematics. At this grade 6 level, about 70% of learners are achieving less than 35% in mathematics. And as the Minister noted in a press release announcing these results, this is unacceptable for a nation whose democratic promise included that of education and skills development, particularly in a global world that celebrates the knowledge society and places a premium on the ability to work skillfully with words, images, and numbers. But carrying on with these statistics, when it comes to housing, what these statistics show is that in 2008, 52% of children in our country were living in urban areas, and that 71% of these 52% were living in informal housing, while just over 2 million children lived in backyard dwellings and shacks in informal settlements. One last recourse to these statistics, and then I want to make some general comments. With respect to access to basic services such as water and sanitation, the child gauge tells us that children are facing substantial health risks. In 2009, our children's access to adequate toilet facilities rose to 63%. Less than 2/3 had access to drinking water on site. Now, when you put all of this together, all of these statistics which I've just shared with you, it's clear, yes, that we're doing better with respect to our children in some respects. We're improving access to education. We're reducing child mortality figures. But it would be hard for you to deny the conclusion that comes out of these statistics that the world is hard for these children. And we see this difficulty that they go through in those newspaper articles to which I referred earlier. 2 children will be killed every day in the country. We know also that because of the quality of the accommodation that our children have access to, that they are continually susceptible to injury. We know that they are going to fail badly in school. With this work that I've been doing in the Western Cape with these grade 3 and 6 tests, we've come to having to deal with this awful reality that only 0.1% of children who are in grade 6 in former DET schools, children would have been classified African, only 0.1%, get your head around this, are able to do grade 6 maths when they are in grade 6. Okay? Only something like 20% of these kids who are in grade 6 in former DET schools will pass items on the test at the grade 3 level. So when I put all of these statistics to you, when I talk to you in this kind of way, it's really hard not to disagree that we are, as I have argued before and said before, in a terrible situation. And so we clearly need to be expressing our outrage at what these figures are saying. But here's this conceptual moment, I hope, kicking in, which I introduced earlier when I spoke to you about childhood being a construct. I'd like to urge, using that conceptual moment that I introduced before, that we be careful in how we approach and how we use information such as I have just shared with you. that we think very carefully about how this information comes to us and how we begin to respond to it. The issue here for me, which is the issue of the lecture, is fundamentally what kind of citizenship we're giving to young people when we use information that we have at our disposal. If we use, and again I'm taking this definition from the child age, if we use the definition which says that citizenship is that sense of membership or that sense of belonging that comes from being treated respectfully and being counted equally with a legitimate, valuable voice, I ask them, in the way in which I have gone about describing these children, are we treating them with respect in those descriptions? Are we giving voice? Are we understanding what kind of voice children should be having in a society which we claim they should be treated with, in which they should be treated with respect and being counted equally?